You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman. You've heard a lot over the past few weeks about federal agents and how they're policing the public in Minneapolis. But let's talk about how people in Washington are currently most likely to interact with Customs and Border Protection at the border. At those crossings, there is the potential for your phone or other devices to be searched. Last fiscal year, Customs and Border Protection reported a 16% increase in searches of digital devices compared with 2024. Maybe you're planning to head to Canada for a weekend trip, or maybe over to the warm weather of Mexico during these dark and dreary winter days. Should you expect your phone to be searched at the border? And what steps can you take to protect your data? I spoke with Gabe Castro-Root about all of this. He reported on these digital searches and what you should know about them for the New York Times. Here's that conversation with Gabe. So I noted that there has been an increase in searches, and there have been headline-grabbing stories. You noted that there was a French scientist who was turned away at the border, and the French government claimed that it was because of political opinions that he expressed in private conversations on his phone. The Trump administration has talked about enhanced vetting practices, especially for people who are not U.S. citizens crossing the border. But when it comes right down to it, how likely is it right now that your device would be searched by Customs and Border Protection if you're, coming into or leaving the country?
Your chances are very low still. Customs and Border Protection reported about 55,000 device searches in fiscal year 2025, which may sound like a lot, but that still represents only about 0.01% of the roughly 420 million people who came in or out of the country in fiscal year 2025. What is notable is that the number has increased over the last few years. In 2024, Customs and Border Protection searched about 47,000 devices. So the number's going up, but it hasn't increased super substantially. And that 47,000 number happened under the Biden administration. So a lot of concern about whether this is increasing super dramatically under the Trump administration is not necessarily accurate.
So what has Customs and Border Protection said about the practice of searching digital devices? Why are they doing it? Why would they search your device?
They say that they're conducting searches to detect things like terrorism-related content or child pornography. And that's true. And also, experts that I spoke with said that they're increasingly concerned that Customs and Border Protection could also be looking for legally protected activities like information about people who attended a protest, or activities that fall into a gray area like communications with doctors who provide treatments that are banned in certain states, like care for transgender minors or abortion services.
The Fourth Amendment protects against warrantless searches, Gabe. So what kind of authority does Customs and Border Protection have to search your phone or your laptop or your tablet or whatever when you're crossing the border?
Right. So there is an exception to the Fourth Amendment's protections at the border. Customs and Border Protection can search any devices that they want to. If you're a U.S. citizen or a legal permanent resident, like a green card holder, you can refuse to unlock your device and you'll still be let into the country. But border agents can hold on to your device for several days and they can still try to gain access to it, even if you don't provide your password. If you're not a legal permanent resident, say you're coming to the U.S. on vacation, or you have a student visa where you're only in the country temporarily, if customs agents ask for access to your device and you decline, they can deny you entry to the country.
That's the end of the trip. Yeah. So there is a difference here between the type of searches they're doing. One is like a basic search and one is what's known as a forensic search. Can you kind of explain the difference between those two?
Yeah, a basic search is sort of exactly what it sounds like. An officer looks at your device and scrolls through the information by hand. So they might look at your text messages or your emails or your photos. A forensic search is a lot less common. But what happens in those cases is agents can actually download all the information from your device onto a government computer for further analysis in the future. And what I think is especially interesting about those searches is that sometimes privacy experts told me they can actually unearth information that the user had deleted. So if that's something you're worried about, if you're concerned about your privacy, just deleting text messages or photos before going through customs may not be enough to protect your information from that kind of search, but it's also important to remember that those searches are exceedingly rare.
What about the different laws in different states? Like, does it matter if I'm flying into Houston from a foreign country versus driving across the border in Blaine, like from Vancouver, Canada, heading back to Seattle? Are there different privacy expectations in different parts of the country?
There's some variability. So in Washington State, where you are, for example, there is a court-established requirement that officers have a reasonable suspicion before conducting a forensic search. In New York, where I am, there's no clear rule one way or another on that. But the distinction really doesn't actually matter that much because Customs and Border Protection simplifies their enforcement by applying that reasonable suspicion requirement everywhere. But what's also worth noting about that requirement is that it has an exception for national security. And the privacy experts I talked to said that that could be pretty broadly interpreted at agents' discretion.
So when it comes to how people should weigh the different factors at play here and make their own decisions on their digital privacy, you talked to some experts who said, even if you think, oh, when I'm traveling, I would never let CBP search my device, there are some attorneys who say, you might want to consider it. What are those factors that people should think about, and why might they consider letting Border Protection search their phone?
Right. If you're not a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, you could be turned around if you don't give access, if you're asked to. So that's an important consideration. It also just depends on your personal comfort level. There's no right or wrong answer. And what can certainly play a big role is the kind of information that you have on your device in the first place. So if you're a doctor or a lawyer or a journalist with confidential sources, you may be much less willing to turn over your device for inspection. If all you have on your phone are family photos and some group chats with your friends, it may not matter so much, and you may be totally fine with letting an agent look through your phone. So what privacy experts stress to me is that it's a really personal choice. There's no right or wrong thing to do when you're considering giving access, but that it's important to think about it in advance and have a plan because there are steps you can take to safeguard your private information.
Yeah, what are some of those practical steps? If I'm traveling and I decided I definitely do not want Border Protection to look through my phone, what are some of the ways that you can protect your data?
So to be prepared in advance, you want to start by setting strong passcodes. And experts recommend, as you've probably all heard, use a complex string of numbers, letters, and special characters. You can even, if you have an iPhone, normally a passcode is just numbers, but you can actually even set one with letters and special characters there if you choose. And if you do choose to use just a numerical code, you can opt for more digits. Another important step to take in advance is to update your software. Some of the privacy experts I talked to described sort of a tug of war between software developers like Apple and the government in terms of trying to either not allow anyone to gain access to a device without a passcode and contracted hackers essentially who try to look for ways to bypass those privacy settings. So by updating your software in advance, having the latest operating system will reduce the chances that Customs and Border Protection agents can gain access to your device if you refuse to provide the passcode. Another thing you can do, depending on the risk level that you think you have, is it may be worth getting a burner phone if you're traveling internationally. Our consumer tech writer here at the Times said that this is what he does, and you can leave your sensitive information, your emails, your photos at home and bring a phone that just has the essential travel documents that you need.
That does seem like something, especially if you're a journalist, a doctor, somebody, a lawyer, somebody who has sensitive information, from their clients or from their sources. That does seem like an extra step that is just going to generally be the safest option, right? And it might not be for everybody, but if you are really concerned about your data, then that would be the way.
Right. None of these steps necessarily have to apply to everyone, but it's certainly a good way to keep your information safe. Another thing that's worth knowing to do in advance is to put your device in airplane mode and to turn it off. And there are a couple reasons for both of those. One is that customs agents are only allowed to search information that's stored directly on the device. And so if you have information that's stored in the cloud or that's accessed over the internet, like a social media account, they can't look through that information. But it's still best practice to put it in airplane mode yourself. They're supposed to do that, but privacy experts recommend doing it beforehand just in case. And if you turn your device off ahead of time, when it comes back on, it will require your passcode and will have turned off biometrics. So if you use Face ID or a fingerprint to unlock your device, those will not be enabled when the device is turned back on if you power it off before going through customs, which is another layer of security. And one more extreme sounding option that is worth considering for some people is to back up your device to the cloud and erase it before you go through customs. And then you can re-download your device later. That one is maybe more of a headache for a lot of people. And again, no one person needs to do all of these, but it's worth considering whether one or two of these recommendations from privacy experts might work for you.
Gabe Castro-Root covers travel with the New York Times, and he is a member of the paper's fellowship class there. Thank you so much, Gabe. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org or on your favorite podcast app.